This is sick.
He was a Japanese-American artist. A few reasons his work is significant to think about. He used technology to create the works. If it wasn't for the tools and machinery that evolved to this time period, he wouldn't have been able to create the forms he did with the materials he did. There's an outdoor museum in upstate New York called Storm King. He has basically monolith pieces. Each piece is probably 5 to 10 tons. It had to be installed by cranes, but he wouldn't have been able to create it without that technology. So he's important on that respect. The other thing that makes him important to think about, he was affected by the cultural state of the world during his lifetime. He was growing up during World War II. Why do you think that would be a major effect of his life?
He was a slave.
He was a Japanese American.
Oh, like racism.
Not even that. Yeah, to a point.
Prosecution?
They would put
Concentration
Japanese internment camps different. They were in
It's
America. Well, concentration camp, they were killed. Internment, they were just basically
Slaves.
nicely imprisoned. No, they were in prison. They weren't slaves. They weren't told what to do and all that. But you were in prison. You
Righteous.
couldn't go anywhere because it was assumed that there was a connection to the Japanese because your heritage was Japanese. So that affected his mentality. So he had both going on. He lived in America. He's been to Japan, but his studio is in Queens. Now it's a museum, but he worked and lived in Queens, New York. The works he did were affected by technologies and the mentality of the time he was around and working. Keep that in mind, as I said, when you're looking and doing research. This whole class is based on not the art itself, but how culture and that time period and what was going on in the world during that time period affects art and how art affected the world. So him being a Japanese American greatly affected how he would relate to the works he did. The way he names them, the way they're made. This is a work called Kouros. Kouros is the first male sculpture that we know from history. It's a male form, it's a nude form. This was his interpretation of that. That's why he named it the same. To him, the physical form was not as important. Things changed. 100 years before that, if somebody would have came out with this and called it the Kouros, which it was an artwork that was known at that point in time also, they would have thought he was nuts and probably laughed him out of the industry. But the time periods changed, the philosophies changed, the thinkings have changed. This becomes accepted. When you're writing your paper, why? Those are the things you need to think about. Why is this particular artist accepted? Why were they significant to the time period? What did they do that was different than the people before them that makes them important? Some of you spoke about this work you can't use, the Brancusi you can't use. Anything else I talk about, you're free to use. These are the only two that are off limits. Some of you spoke over there about the Jackson Pollock, the one with the splat painting. He's another artist that before him, that was unheard of. People would have laughed. But what was going on at the time that he was creating this artwork that becomes acceptable? What thinkings were going on? What technologies were available? What made the world accept that as artwork where 100 years previously they would have thought it was garbage and laughed him out of the industry? Any questions?
What is it, like a duck?
Kouros. Did you listen? I'm glad you're videotaping it.
What's going on with this?
Kouros was basically the first known sculpture of a Greek male. It's from ancient Greek, and that's his interpretation
Of the man, that's a dude.
Interpretation
Of the man.
Wait, I think I see
of
it.
a man.
I see.
Jenny, you had a question?
Yep.
So we're gonna sit tomorrow, and what was the other question? Yes. He chose all his work, all his materials, he chose for a specific purpose. Whether it was because of the vein or the mark of the veins. And that they would call it going through. And that way it movement to the stone. Stone, in and of itself, doesn't move unless it's a boulder coming down an avalanche. But it's pretty immovable, solid. But if you look at his works, the way he puts the works,
Does that
the
look like a man to you?
and the stone veins, it has movement, it has a tension that you wouldn't think could happen otherwise. That smaller piece is sitting on top of the other one. We know physically that normally can't happen, but he arranged it in a way that our eye sees it and creates tension. He has the other pieces fit into each
It's
other.
so bizarre.
They just can hang suspended. Stone, in our mind, should not hang and be suspended in that way. So it has a tension. It has what's called visual tension. And he relied on those things in a lot of his works. Any other questions? Okay. Whatever you say, I'm good.
That's that. The Greek interpretation of a male.
Anybody that needs to go to the